All right, guys, welcome back to the Adam Peter Fitness Podcast. Today on the show, I have none other than the Swolefessor himself, Marcellus Williams. Marcellus is a online powerlifting coach based out in Texas, and he coaches the likes of Ashton Ruska, is also an athlete himself and has a lot of clients. I think that's something that is really unique about Marcellus is being an actual competitive powerlifter while also being a very, very good coach. Marcellus from other powerlifting coaches like Steve Denovi and Sean Noriega that I've talked to say that, you're one of the few coaches that really gives clients a ton of time. And that's a really, really big thing. And I think that's a big reason why you have such a good reputation, why you've developed just such a, whenever somebody is thinking about powerlifting coaching, Swolefessor always comes up in that conversation among, TSA, strength guys, all these other great coaches for a big reason. And then also Marcellus just competed in a powerlifting meet himself. And so I thought was really, really cool was on his channel. And I think this kind of just goes to show where Marcellus is and who he is as a person, as well as a good coach. He could have done raw nats, but he decided to be selfless and focus on his athletes and, having them have a great experience and decide to push back to a different meet. So I think that's a very, very tough decision. But I think that says a lot about the man on the other side of the screen. So also he has his bachelor's degree in kinesiology. So really, 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 really smart dude. So I guess I want to ask for more Marcellus now, as I can keep yapping for a while. How are you doing? And anything else you'd like to add about yourself?
No, I'm doing great, man. Once again, thank you for having me on. Really excited to be here and just, have a good discussion with you and answer any questions you have. And no, man, I think you summed me up pretty well as far as the introduction. Yeah, like I'm somebody, I always tell people, I'm a coach first. I don't believe in shortchanging my clients or quality of their work or their training just to focus more on my own. But at the same time, as I've said this on my channels on Instagram, I don't believe that being a good coach is an excuse to slack on my own training. And if anything, I feel like the two build off each other. Like because I take my lifting very seriously, I take my own training very seriously, I don't slack on it. It allows me to be a lot more relatable to my clients, as well as I kind of like to think it helps me to set an example for them, showing that I practice what I preach. And at the same time, it's one of those things where it's like, being a coach of, these different lifters of these different levels with different backgrounds. I coach people who are like, nurses in the military, police officers, like very hectic schedules, but still seeing them get after it. Like, it motivates me with my own lifting. So the two, I like to say, fuel each other very well. So yeah, but I appreciate that type of acknowledgement as far as, giving my clients attention, because that is something that I do take pride in and do try to do. My motto is treat each client you have like they're the only one you have. Obviously different clients, need different levels of attention. Some people you might talk to on a daily basis, some more like, on a weekly, on an as need basis, but it's like whatever the client needs, I want to make sure I can give that to them and provide that to them, especially like, as the roster's grown, being very careful with at what rate it grows, which I'm sure we'll probably get into that later. Just so that I'm never shortchanging, like, any client for another. And at the same time, not shortchanging myself because, I've got my own life. I'm married. I'm about to be a father in January. So it's definitely a balance as far as that. But no, I think you introduced it pretty well, man.
Yeah, that's great. I actually I wanted to go off of what you just said there about how being an athlete helps you as a coach. Would you mind kind of delving a little bit more into how those experiences as an athlete, as staying active in the community and training as a powerlifter, how has that really influenced your programming decisions, how you communicate with your athletes and whatnot?
Yeah, for sure. So for one thing, it's like, um, when you have clients who come to you, right? Whether it's a client where maybe they're brand new to powerlifting, right? Maybe they're like, beginner or low level intermediate lifter, or might see something like that. Um, it can be very, very difficult, even if you have the head knowledge, right? Like, even if what you're saying is factually correct and stuff like that, I feel like it can be very difficult to buy into what somebody's saying if it seems like they themselves aren't doing it, or they themselves aren't showing the results of it, right? Like, it's easy to say on paper, like, hey man, look, if you just be true to your RPEs and you sack consistent sessions back to back versus pushing super hard balls to the wall all the time, then you're going to get results. It's easy to say that, right? But if you have somebody where their training style was maybe like them pushing it more and that's been working for them, and if they start to have issues with that, if that's been working for them and you're telling them that, hey, what I want you to do, this new method's going to be beneficial to you, but you have no way of showing that, whether with other clients or yourself, I feel like it's a lot harder to buy into that. So for me, it's like, one, I kind of have a nice philosophy where I don't try to do crazy things with a client's programming if I have not tested it on myself to a degree, and obviously within reason, right? Because certain things that may work for me won't necessarily work for another client, or certain things that work for a client may not work for me. But within reason, I need to have some type of experience with it, because even though, like I said, we can say on paper, hey, this works, or hey, try this, it'll feel good. It's a lot easier when you can break down things in a way that people can relate to. And I feel like that's a lot easier to do if you've gone through it yourself, right? And it doesn't even mean that you have to necessarily be as strong as like all of your clients. Like obviously I'm nowhere near as strong as Ashton, right? Most people aren't. But because when he talks about like, having to, balance like his work life schedule with training, or what a certain squat feels like at certain exertions and stuff like that, or dealing with like the plateaus of like having high and low days as far as strength training, I'm able to address those concerns with him, not only because I've worked with other high level lifters, I've gone through the same thing, but because I've gone through the same thing myself. And I feel like that's very underrated. I'm not going to go as far as to say that you have to still be competing or training super hard to be a good coach. I'm not going to go so far as to say that. I think Steve DeNovi is a great example. I know he's somebody where he doesn't really compete anymore himself, but he's got enough experience from his background and enough of the knowledge and enough experience with other clients to show that he knows what he's doing. But I think for me personally, it's this thing where I do think it does give you an edge. I think it does give you an advantage because you are more relatable to your clients. And even something as simple as this, like all the programming stuff aside, it is, I think I can safely say it is motivating when my clients see me go out there and do my thing on the platform. It fires them up and makes them want to do. But hey, if coach is out here getting it, practicing what he's preaching and doing it, then I don't have any excuse, right? And like I said, that relationship is inverse too. When I see my clients go out there and do their thing, it fires me up that much more to want to go out there and do my own thing. So that's a big mental aspect of it. And then from the programming standpoint, so many things that I have been able to do with people, maybe even from like from a programming perspective, like volume dosage and stuff like that, I know it works because I've been able to try it on myself, right? And be like, okay, I got this type of response with it. So if we take the same, application, apply it to you within reason of how it works for you, we might get the same type of result, right? And then from a technical perspective, man, it helps so much because even though, I'm never going to be somebody that says I have bad genetics. I don't believe I have bad genetics like that. But I'm not the most well leveraged power lifter. I'm pretty jacked. I try to make up for it by being technically efficient like that. But I'm not built crazy well for the squat. I've got a long range motion on the bench, and I'm built okay for deadlifts, right? But because I've taken the time to find ways to work around things movement wise for my leverages, it's so easy with most other people because most of my clients are built better for this than I am. So I feel like I wouldn't be able to figure a lot of those things out for myself if I didn't have the incentive of my own training to go base off. You know what I mean? So I think that's a big thing that helps with it a lot.
Yeah, and I think knowing essentially what your athlete's going through and kind of their mindset, especially I know from myself personally with my coach Eric Bodhorn, I'm pretty quiet. Usually, just when I'm just training, I'll check in. I'll say, hey, though, this is how the training's been going. Usually, for me though, it's like, yeah, like body weight's this, and I felt this about this lift, etc. Besides that, like I'm pretty good. But like once I get more close to me and like I get more in my own head, and lifters tend to get a little bit more neurotic. When I have a client who's like concerned that they're a week out and their taper workout deadlifts felt heavy or something like
Yeah.
that, I can say it's fine. Like it's Tuesday.
Yeah.
If you felt great right now, you probably peaked too early, and I'd be concerned about you being strong on game day.
Yeah.
I think, and there's also a lot of, I think a big part of it is like that trust, because when you said, when coach is going after it and coach is training too, he's done this. He knows what I'm feeling like. He knows what this is like, because anybody, I think it's very difficult to relate to your athletes if you have never actually done the damn thing, because you're
Absolutely.
like, like fatigue when you're 4 weeks out. like I'm 4 weeks out, I feel like I got hit by a truck. If a client is like 4 weeks out and they're like, okay, I feel like I got hit by a truck, is something wrong here, like, you
Yeah.
know, 80% feels like 90% like what's going on. I'm like, it's man,
Yeah.
like, taper's coming, like, we're gonna pull back volume or whatever. It just helps them kind of trust you a lot more, that the process is going to work out. And if you especially have like successful experiences yourself, you can say, hey, look, I remember in this prep, I felt exactly your way. Or, God forbid, like you get like a minor pec strain. Like I've had pec strains every single prep. But like I
Yeah.
just show up on the platform and do fine.
Yeah.
And that's less due to like programming and more due to me just being me being a little bit immature with pushing into intensity. And I've kind of figured out like some things with myself too, like what you said about like the response too, like myself. It's like I can't really push exertion really hard below 5 reps on bench, or else I just taint my strength. I have to keep it lower and sit out for like one day, because I know based on the past data, like I'm going to absolutely taint my strength. So I think everything that you said there just kind of just goes into like, um, coaching is much more complex than people understand,
Absolutely.
because you need to know what the sport is. You need to know what goes into it, what the bodies are going through, what the mindset is like, because powerlifting is just like really any other sport in a
Yeah.
lot of ways.
Yeah.
So,
And it forces you to keep learning more. Like, yes, of course, we keep learning more from looking at actual, like, research, watching content from other coaches. And I'm all for that. I'm a complete nerd when it comes to that. But there's so much that we still learn from experience. And when it comes to exercise science and strength training as a whole, there's still so much we're learning, because compared to a lot of other fields, it's still a relatively new field. You know what I mean? Even like, our degrees like in kinesiology and exercise science. So a lot of the things that people even decide to do research on is based upon things that people have experienced. So it's like, by continuing to be a lifter myself, I'm giving myself this incentive to keep learning more so I can make myself better. And as a result, I'm learning more to help make my clients better as well. And like you said, with most other sports, even coaches, and like, football, basketball, maybe they're not playing now, but they played at some point more often than not, right? And I think powerlifting is one of those cool things where you actually can keep coaching and keep playing a lot longer compared to other sports, if you so choose to. And even if you don't compete frequently, I do think that still training is important. And once again, I think me competing myself does help me a lot and kind of give me an edge with helping my clients, especially when it comes to like game day handling and stuff like that, because of, you go through yourself, like you said. So absolutely agree as far as that.
yeah, I think those are all really, really good points. So, I guess main takeaways from that, for the listeners would be just make sure that, if you are looking for a coach, or whatnot, you should probably make sure they have had some sort of experience in the sport, themselves, and they can, so that they can actually relate to, because that's a huge part of prep, of overall becoming a better lifter. Because like what you said too, I think something really important is like you've experimented certain things on yourself. And obviously n=1, but still, like what you said, exercise science and kinesiology, we don't know that much about powerlifting specific training. Like, I mean, there's some labs like FAU, that are doing some things related to powerlifting, but there's not that much, because unfortunately, for us powerlifters and us meatheads, people are more interested in curing cancer than increasing, your max on squat by 100 pounds in a year. So we're not quite there yet. But yeah, so I think that's just really, really, really great stuff. So I wanted to, transition into, how did you find powerlifting? How did you get introduced to the sport, and what led you to, the path that you're currently on? Because it's a very unique path that you have, and a very unique career to actually make a living as a coach online. So I guess let's just talk about your origin story.
Yeah. I like that origin story. That's dope. No, so for me, I've been pretty much physically active my entire life. My parents pretty much, raised me, especially my dad, with the mentality of like, you want to have a sharp mind and a strong body. So, I was always outside playing and stuff like that. And I actually got into just working out with my body weight. So calisthenics, push-ups, pull-ups, body weight squats, stuff like that. Even believe it or not, even like calf raises on the stairs and stuff, for what good it did me, which was none at all. But my dad got me into that when I was 11 years old, just, calisthenics. And, of course, played sports growing up, like played basketball in elementary, football in middle school, got more into boxing and MMA in high school and my first couple of years of college. But that's kind of where the working out started, would just be, calisthenics stuff. And it's funny because like from age 11 to 17, I was that dude where I kind of like make fun of people who actually went to the gym to lift weights. Cause I'd be like, why would you pay money to go do that when you can just work out at home or, or go work out like that. Right. But then, yeah, when I turned 17, it was like my junior year in high school. And like I said, started kind of getting a little bit more into MMA and wanting to be able to throw a punch harder, take more of a punch, things like that. Cause I was always like a skinnier dude, right? Like even when I was like lean, you could tell like when I had my shirt off that I worked out, I was always like still like a smaller dude. So I kind of got more into lifting weights for that reason. Was mostly for that. And when I got into lifting weights, I kind of pretty much had the same mentality that I had with calisthenics. With calisthenics, it's like kind of like, full bodies, like do some push-ups, do some pulls, do some bodyweight squats. So with lifting weights, I kind of had the same mindset where I was kind of going in and just trying to get stronger on everything, bench press, squats. I actually didn't really mess with deadlifts until I started powerlifting, but bench press, squats, any machines that were there, I would just like do all of them and try to like, get as strong as I could on them, track how much weight I was doing for a certain amount of sets and reps and just kind of increase that from there. But when I kind of got into lifting weights, my senior year in high school is when I first kind of heard about powerlifting at all, because I would work out with the football players like in the school barnyard where we kept all our weights and stuff like that in my high school. And one of the football coaches, also the powerlifting coach, because even though he knew that I wasn't like on football teams, I was doing MMA and stuff like that. He was like, "Hey, so we do like powerlifting in our off season. You should come like do that." And I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what powerlifting was. We pretty much described it as like, like you do bench squat and deadlift and you get like, you get scored based on how much weight you lift. So that sounded really fun to me. Right. So I went to one of the first practices and the first thing this guy did was he handed me a bench shirt because it was equipped, because it was like equipped only.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, what the hell is this? Because I had no idea what it was. And I kid you not, I spent like 20 minutes trying to get the thing on. And by the time I got it on, I was like, nah, this isn't for me. So I took it off, didn't even like go to the practice because I was like, this is not what I thought it was going to be. So for the longest time, I really had like no interest in powerlifting at all as far as that. Still like, wanted to keep lifting weights and getting stronger, but I didn't really have an interest in powerlifting. And then when I came across powerlifting again was actually when I transferred to the University of North Texas for my junior year in college. That's when when was that? 2014 or 2015, something like that. But came across it because I was just working out in the rec center. I was a personal trainer at the rec center at the time, working at the weight room desk, had a couple of jobs too. But I would work out there regularly. And there's this dude, his name was Eddie. And I would see him and this other kid named Taskin. I would see them squatting and deadlifting together. And they were squatting and deadlifting like so much more than what I was at the time. And I just really wanted to like, man, like I want to learn how they're like squatting and deadlifting that much. So I went up to them. I was like, hey, yo, can y'all like show me like how you got so strong on squat and deadlift? And they were pretty much like, yeah, if you show us how you got so strong on the bench press. So I was like, okay, sure, whatever. Which, mind you, at that time, I didn't have much advice to give on that really outside of like the basics. I just kind of at the time for my body weight had a really good bench press. But then they, from hanging out with them and talking to them, they're like, hey man, you should come to the meeting for like the powerlifting team, which at that time wasn't even like at this point, UNT has a full on powerlifting team, but at that time it was just like a small student organization that had barely started. And I was like, I'm not really interested in that because of the experience that I had in high school, whatever. But that's when they told me like, oh no, this is raw powerlifting. I was like, oh, what's that? And that's when they kind of explained it to me. So ended up going to the meeting. And that was maybe in like, I want to say it was like in October. And then I ended up doing my first meet like a couple months later in November. So the Texas Longhorn Open, I believe it was. And I loved it, man. I loved it. Like at that time, like I literally like was still kind of just training however I wanted. Then I did like I think a quick like 12-week, powerlifting program to like peak and taper into the meet or whatever. My first meet, like none of my equipment was my own. My knee sleeves, I was using squat shoes, my belt, my singlet was all my boy Eddie's stuff. But I did that and I really enjoyed it. It was a fun time. But I still didn't really full on get into just powerlifting only yet at that time. Like I did the meet, then I went back to kind of training however I wanted to train. Cause, I still like doing like, just different movements and kind of like, push pull leg type stuff, all that kind of stuff. Right. But I did another meet in 2016 before I graduated from college. And then I still continued to do meets after that, like in 2017. But essentially when I graduated because I graduated, like you said, my degree in kinesiology. And originally my goal was to just get certified as a strength and conditioning specialist. And then maybe go either like work like with some type of corporate fitness or coaching. That's kind of what I wanted to do originally. But in the time that I was doing personal training at UNT, I kind of just fell in love with just personal training. Like I really enjoy like just those interactions and stuff like that. So when I first graduated from UNT, I was trying to interview at different corporate fitness places, and I would interview really, really well, but they would be like, "Oh man, you interview well, but we want someone with more experience." Well, it's like, well, I just graduated, so the only experience I had was, the personal training that I'd done at UNT. So I ended up getting a full-time personal training position at TCU, Texas Christian University, and was doing that. But at the end of 2016 is when I started my YouTube channel, and pretty much I've been told through like my senior year in high school and all throughout college that, hey man, you got to make a YouTube channel because you're good at breaking down like fitness information, health, fitness, blah, blah, blah. I just never really had the time to do it in college because I was taking like heavy course workload, was working 4 jobs. So I was trying to avoid, taking out student loans, but I finally started one at the end of 2016. And funnily enough, I started it right after I went to this little event in Dallas. Like it was like a canned good event that Chris Jones and Christian Guzman, you know those guys, right? Uh-huh. Yeah. I started after I got to meet them, was in line, gave my can away. I shook Christian Guzman's hand. I shook Chris Jones's hand. But then Chris Jones and I actually ended up having like an actual conversation. He kind of liked what I had to say and kind of like what my background was and stuff like that. So I actually ended up later becoming like a Pump Chasers athlete. And that kind of helped me with the YouTube channel stuff as well. But pretty much, man, yeah. So before I even got into like powerlifting coaching, it was pretty much just I was training full time at TCU. And then I had the YouTube channel where I was trying to put out free information. I was uploading like 3 to 5 videos a week, going over misinformation, breaking different myths, talking about, calories in versus calories out, progressive overload, putting out free programs, stuff like that. Then eventually got to a point where people were asking me like, hey man, like you should start can you make custom programs and stuff like that? So I was making custom programs, I kid you not, like for $20 a program, like custom made like programs, stuff like, and it was selling well, but the demand for that got like really, really high. And then people would be like, oh, do you should do online coaching? And that's kind of where I was like, I don't know about that, because keep in mind, one, for the longest time, I thought personal training was a meme, like in general, which is ironic because it's like, why would you pay someone to teach you how to work out? You can learn that on your own, right? And then I ended up becoming a personal trainer. Then I thought online coaching was a meme because it's like, how can you coach people well online, like compared to in-person, stuff like that. But then I kind of like, as I got more into it, I realized that, okay, there is a way you can go about this if you're on top of like the communication or like doing Skype check-ins and sending videos and stuff like that. So basically in 2017, that's when I decided to actually start taking on online clients. And then even then it wasn't necessarily powerlifting specific. It was more like, general strength training, weight loss, stuff like that. And I still do that to this day. Some of my clients just still, whatever their goals are, whether it's strength training, powerlifting, weight loss, or just, getting stronger for whatever other sport they play. I still have clients who are like in those categories. But I started getting more into powerlifting for myself. Like I said, I did another meet in 2017. I did a meet with Russell Orhe, who at that point, he and I had done some collabs through YouTube, become really good friends through that. And I actually did a meet with Michael C., who's now my client. Like that was one of the first meets that we all did together, was in 2017. And after that meet, that was the first meet I think I did where I actually didn't like, it's the first meet where I didn't PR my total from the previous meet. So after that, I was like, okay, I gotta like get more serious about this, right? So that's when I really started diving deeper into like powerlifting specific programming, looking into like getting a coach myself and stuff like that. So pretty much 2017 is when I started doing it, just kind of like on the side. And by 2018, I was actually working with the UNT powerlifting team. So at that point, the organization had become a full-on team, and they asked me to come on and actually start coaching them. So I was kind of just spreading myself really thin between like, okay, full-time at TCU, then driving an hour to Denton to coach the UNT powerlifting team, still trying to put out YouTube content, still kind of doing my own thing with online clients, stuff like that. And I was looking at everything I was doing, and I was like, okay, I need to make a decision here. And I was like, TCU is a full-time job, the benefits, all that kind of stuff, can get raised, stuff like that. And it's for sure, I know how much I'm making, right? But I was like, at this point, I was like, I was really enjoying the online training. And funnily enough, finding that it was way more engaging and diverse than like what the in-person training could be. Because, when you were doing in-person training, working for like, a school or gym or whatever, you're limited to usually like, 30 minutes or an hour with that person. That's about it. Yeah. So you're kind of what all you can do and how much you can do with it. So, whereas with online training, you can have as much interaction and engagement as you want. So I kind of just decided to kind of take a leap of faith and be like, I think I can really do this. I think if I just focus on keep putting out good content on YouTube and letting that kind of be the marketing, because I'm not somebody where I kind of do the whole, oh, hey guys, I have this many openings or anything like that. I kind of just let my work be the marketing, like put out the free information and then showing what I'm doing with my own training and my clients and let that market itself. And I'm like, I feel like if I just put my efforts into this, then I can, make at least a decent living off of this. So that's what I did. So I ended up going into it full time in 2018 and kind of just started steadily building things from there, man. As far as like, that's kind of how I got into the powerlifting coaching. And pretty much it was just, working with whoever would want to work with me or hire me at the time. Pretty much my biggest source of people flooding in at that time, and really even now this day, was from YouTube. Like people would see my content on YouTube and they would really like it, so they would reach out to me for coaching. That's how a lot of people came, like my first clients came across me. And then of course, do really good work with those clients, start showing their progression, like on Instagram and stuff like that. And then other people see you through that. So pretty much YouTube and word of mouth from my other clients has been the biggest things that have allowed my coaching to grow very steadily. And I did make sure that I did it steadily. Like for the longest time, I wouldn't work with more than 20 people at a time. And that was just because I want to make sure that I can really get this down and make sure the quality stays good with those 20 people. And then I eventually expanded it to 30, I want to say, like halfway through 2018, approaching 2019. And I kept it at 30 all the way up until 2020. Made sure that I worked with no more than 30 people. And I just wanted to get to a point where even if somebody had to stop coaching or, or God forbid, had to let somebody go for whatever reason, that there will always be somebody like always be an email that goes through for somebody to want to come in and take that spot. So when I got that down as far as like 30 clients, I got to a point where I was like, okay, I think I've got this down enough to where I can expand it a little bit. So in 2020 is when I first started expanding it out to, my goal was to try to get to like, between 50 and 60. And once again, I just did it very steadily, like, take on 2 or 5 at a time, work with them for a few months, make sure everyone's settled in, then take on a few more and kind of just went from there. And pretty much, when my first my first top 10 lifters I ever worked with was Michael C, who, at that point, he and I had already been friends. He kind of had already seen how I went about my coaching and my training. We kind of collabed together for him going into Worlds of 2019. It went really well. So then, he's like, so then he came to me to be his full-time coach going into nationals. And just, that's kind of, I think that's probably when I became a little bit more known on the coaching scene, even though it's probably like already kind of known in the YouTube scene, was 2019 nationals with Michael. And then from there, it's just kind of like, built up steadily and, making different connections with different people and just, having people like Jamar, Ashton, Bob Matthews, having them over time reach out like, hey man, I want to work with you as far as coaching. So that's pretty much how I've, long story short, even though that's still kind of long winded, like how I kind of got to where I'm at now, man. It's just been, just doing right by the people who have come to me. And like I said, treating them like they're the only clients that I have because I feel like unfortunately, like some people, they may get a certain client and to be like, okay, cool, I've made it. Like I'm good. And my mindset is kind of like, no, always treat these clients like they're the only ones you're ever going to have. And in doing that and doing right by them, I think people are kind of able to, see for themselves. Cause I tell people all the time, I'm like, okay, I think the way you should kind of judge your work with the coach should be based off their knowledge, their experience, and what their clients have to say about them. I think my YouTube channel speaks very well for my knowledge. I think my own lifting shows my experience. And then, my goal with my clients is to, anytime you ask any of my clients, I don't care if it's Ashton Ruska or one of my clients you never heard of, I want them to be able to have nothing but good things to say. So that's kind of always been my goal with the coaching. And I feel like that's what's allowed it to be very sustainable. I'm very blessed to be where I'm at this point. I'm definitely making more than what I ever thought I would doing this, but in a way that I can go to sleep at night knowing that I feel like I'm doing things the right way. So
I think that's all really, really good. Thank you so much for that. I think that you point out a really, really so some cool things there. Like one, just the whole fact that raw powerlifting and its expansion has really only been like in the past 5 years.
Yeah.
Basically
Yeah.
dominated with equipped. And I think that's, people are a little bit more read into the sport and know that. But like, especially like I know in Texas, especially, because I know that Texas high school powerlifting is even bigger than the US APL.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of it is equipped because a lot of times those high school coaches are kind of like part of the old guard who were powerlifting or whatnot. And historically, it was you use a bench shirt, squat suit, and whatnot. And I know Russell or he kind of had a similar reaction to quick powerlifting. He's like,
Yeah.
nah, like this isn't it, man. But then kind of having raw powerlifting, like one, it's way more accessible because you don't have to like spend all that money on like a bench shirt, a squat suit, a deadlift suit. And then you can really do it wherever. Like you don't have to spend forever putting on like your suit to go and do a squat session and all this stuff. And it's also like probably arguably a little bit more sustainable from a health perspective in terms of the load that your body can handle. Because although I know that a lot of quick powerlifting was like Bryce Krawcheck, for example, it was very vocal about this, how most of quick training is done raw. But
Yeah.
obviously, if you're putting on a suit that can make you lift 80 pounds more than what your body can actually handle, your risk of injury kind of goes up. But also, like for powerlifting, in terms of like its growth, I think raw powerlifting is the best thing that's happening for the sport because people can look at that, see somebody who has like knee sleeves on a belt, and it's just like, oh, like that's kind of like it's related, it's relatable to anybody who has lifted weights. Like, oh, like I kind of know what that's like. Um,
Yeah.
so I
Absolutely.
think that that's something really, really, really cool. And then obviously you kind of have had like this very, very slow progression. I think that's really, really important with anybody who's kind of going into this as a powerlifting coach or as anybody who's trying to do personal training or create their own online brand. There's a few things that you kind of point out there. One, like you start off really, really, really slow, but you got experience with personal training with, you start off doing custom programs for $20. You put out lots of free content. You
Yeah.
probably do this mostly because you just loved it to start. It wasn't like I see this end goal and it's exactly what I want. You're just like, oh, this is just kind of fun. People are saying
Yeah.
like this
Yeah.
is a good idea, good idea. I'll try it out. We'll see. I'm still gonna like this is kind of like a side hustle. And as things went along, you're like, oh shit, like people are really like liking this. I'm getting really great reception. And then my client roster is kind of growing. And then once you kind of got more experience with that, because personal training is way different from online coaching in terms of
Yeah.
like one, like time management, it's harder. Two, like if you're only going, most people looking for personal training, you can offer them access outside of the gym, but then like once you like add in like that and this personal training sessions, it's like not everybody can pay you like $700 a month for that service. And then you kind of get into the online coaching, which is a lot more accessible. You can help a lot more people, and you've networked your way up. And you basically worked with people that were just trying to get a little bit stronger, a little bit more jacked, and then as you
Yeah.
got more reputability and you expand your network, your word of mouth travels, and then start off slowly really handling your clients to make sure that your reputation is good. I think that's huge because that's something that like I've done. Like I don't work with more than 30 people at a time right now, and the reason why is because I've only been coaching for a year uh,
Yeah.
full
Yeah.
time. So I don't want to bring on like what you said. I want to make sure each one of those clients and their check-ins and what my response is like you know how it is. Like if you're getting like like coaching is still a job, and you can get really overwhelmed sometimes by looking at like your long
Yeah.
to-do list, all these messages you have to go through, responding to hundreds and hundreds. And but
Yeah.
like as you kind of work your way and allow yourself to grow into your business, you're going to just see like it kind of grow for you. And
Yes.
that's probably
And
what you experience, and then eventually, like you end up with, having these really high level lifters coming to you, with your network, and then it kind of does come down to you just keep doing things right, and
yeah.
not everybody will be able to do this full time,
Yeah.
but I think that if you're like yourself, like you're clearly a very high achiever. For somebody that you probably like working really hard, and you probably really like helping out others. And I think that's why you're a good coach.
Yeah. Yeah. And I try to tell people that too, that like there's some people where they try this and they're not great. Look, most of the time it's not that you're not smart enough to do it, or it's not that you're not capable, but it's like you said, there has to be an inherent passion. Like I'm someone where I've always enjoyed helping people, like period. Like even before I became a personal trainer, just working out with my friends and them being like one of my best friends, his name is Ron. He's like the best man at my wedding. And that was the first time I experienced like just seeing how the same things that working out did for me, seeing what it did for somebody else. And I just really enjoyed it. It was really cool to like be a part of that process and help guide someone with the work they're doing to like feel healthier, stronger, more confident, things like that. Right. So there's certain soft skills that I feel like, some of the skills you can definitely learn and get better at. Like I think people can learn like how to put on different hats for different clients, right? Because everyone's a little bit different in terms of how you approach them. But certain things like just being passionate about helping people or liking to work hard, that sometimes that's it's in you and sometimes it's not. I don't think it makes you a bad person. I think it makes you a bad person if you know it's not in you and you try to force it, because then you end up screwing other people over. But yeah, I mean, and for me, it's like, especially if you go about the way that I do it, where it's like, on top of like the check-ins and stuff, my clients have 24/7 access to me. I always respond to their messages in 24 hours, stuff like that. That's a lot. That's a lot of social engagement from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed. And it's definitely a balance too. And what's funny is a lot of people don't know this, but I am definitely more introverted by nature. A lot of people would never guess that just based upon like my YouTube channel and stuff like that. And I definitely learned to be more extroverted like over time, but I definitely somebody where I still have to make sure I have that time to kind of just be at peace, because you can't pour from an empty glass, and you have to learn those things if you want to be good at this, especially taking on more clients. But I'll also say that you get more efficient the longer you do it if you go about it the right way, because if you just suddenly go from 0 clients to 20 or 30, that's going to be overwhelming. But if you start with a handful of clients, you get really good with them, and then you build steadily, it's easier because those clients you've been working with for a long time, like clients that I've had since 2017 who are still with me today, like it's clockwork. It's easy. We have a good relationship. We know how things go. So it's not really extra work with them. You know what I mean? Whereas if you, like I said, you take on 20, 30 new people at once, and that's going to be very overwhelming. But once again, it's about where your headspace is at. Like if your goal in doing this is literally just money, one, I'm going to tell you to find something else, because there's other things you can way easier that will pay you better. But two, you're not going to stick with it or go about it the right way. And I really do believe the key to making this work, and it's ironic because your goal with this should be doing it to help people because you love it and you enjoy it anyway. But if you are looking at it from the perspective of finances, you will be a lot better long-term financially if you go about it the right way than if you get greedy with it. Because if you get greedy with it, you start making mistakes, you start slacking on your clients, and your integrity and like your reputation is everything when it comes to online coaching. It really, really is. Like, because when people can start saying stuff like, oh, he doesn't pay attention to his weaker clients, or, oh, he'll go however long without sending you your block, whatever it may be, that is damaging to your reputation. That's going to hurt you long-term financially as well. So it's like, don't fake it. You know what I mean? Like if it's not for you, it's not for you. It's okay to try this and realize it's not really for you. Or if you're somebody where, yeah, this will always be like a part-time thing for me, I'm never going to do it full-time. That's fine. It's just being honest with yourself and what you really want.
That's huge. Because doing this full-time job is way different than saying I'm gonna have 5 or 10 clients. I kind of train, I kind of text back and forth, because if you want to have a coaching business, like what you said, like you have to have those systems in place. You have to slowly grow over time. And Eric Helms has talked about this a few times. He's like Alberto Nunez, for example, can handle a lot of clients. Like he does that very, very, very well. It just works well for him. And Eric's like, when he was working for 3DMJ as the coach, he found out the hard way that 35 was his cap. He couldn't go over to 35, or else you notice that like he didn't really have any free time. He was kind of had that quality degrade, and your reputation is really what, if you want to do this full time long term, nobody cares if you're making X amount of money right now. It's about how much money can you sustainably make with like any other career. And the cool thing about health and fitness and wellness and powerlifting training is that everybody wants to be healthier, look better, whatnot. Not everybody wants to be a powerlifter, especially, but I mean, if you're talking like you put out lots of diverse content. Now, most of it is niche towards the specific population, which is really important with any sort of business. But you also have like that general help out there. And I love how you said that, is this is kind of I position my own YouTube channel. It's small, but I'm very proud that I can look on my channel. If somebody has a question about how do I do this with my lift, how do I do this, how do I select weights, how do I progress weights, I say, I bet, like, here's a link to like an article or that I wrote, or a post I made, or
Yeah.
a video that I made. I think that's also really important as an online coach, because you're not there in person. But what that does, if you have your videos like online, it's like, oh, this is coach doing this. It's not just like, oh, here's like Bryce Crawchet, who's not my coach, telling me how to do things.
Yeah.
And like that's another part of online coaching. And then, like with my own systems, with my coaching, I'm exactly like you, like Skype sessions, phone calls,
Yeah.
asynchronous video check-ins, like using like Loom to like go over like all the things, because, and then WhatsApp communication, 24/7 access to me, 24-hour responses. Like it's a lot of work, but like this is why you're saying, like, bro, like if you're just not passionate about it, like you're just going to burn out. The burnout rate of personal training is high for a reason. It's a
Yep.
mentally and emotionally exhausting job.
Very,
I think
very.
I think it's interesting that you said that you're an introvert. I'm introverted too.
Yeah.
I am also extroverted in the sense of like, if somebody says like go out and perform, like I'm like, okay, bet. Like I have
Yeah.
confidence I've like put on, like it's like, because I know I've put in the work, I guess.
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
you can kind of turn it into a chameleon sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. It's like, and like, it's my dad's an introvert by nature, my mom's an extrovert, so I'm definitely kind of a balance. But it's like I'm that person where, when I go out and I handle at meets, or I go do a meet and like, go have fun with post meet activities and stuff like that. Like I enjoy it while I'm doing it, but then afterwards, like, okay, I need to kind of like
Yeah,
chill for like a month and kind of recharge. You know what I
yeah,
mean? So yeah, it's definitely that balance. And like you said, the emotional energy that goes into it too. I think a lot of people forget that when it comes to coaching anything, but especially powerlifting coaching, it's not just here's your program or even just talking about the training. So much of the talks I have with my clients are about their life, things they're dealing with, things they're going through, because let's be honest, what impacts them outside the gym is going to impact them inside the gym, those recovery variables, those outside stressors. So you definitely to a degree have to be a people person. I just, it's going to be very difficult to do this if you're not. So yeah.
yeah. Well, I think that's all really, really good stuff. I guess for like the last little portion of this, I want to talk a little bit about more meet day specific things. So first off, I love how you said in your little origin story, you literally signed up, you found out about raw powerlifting and you competed like 2 months later.
Yeah.
Everybody asks, when should I compete? And my answer is usually, do you want to? Okay,
Yeah.
find a meet, sign up. Let's just do it.
Yeah.
Is kind of your perspective on it too?
Yeah. Like I tell people, like if you're just getting into it for yourself, right? And let's say you haven't gotten a coach, but you're just trying to decide if you want to do it. Maybe you want to do a meet first before you decide if you want to do a coach. I'm like, okay, especially if you've already been working out, because most people don't, hopefully, like I try to tell people, hopefully you've been working out and then you go into powerlifting instead of like powerlifting being your first exposure to working out. Not that it's always the worst thing, but yeah, it's like, okay, find a meet that's like 12 weeks out, like 3 months, do a quick prep and go for it. You know what I mean? And now if somebody comes to me, right, and they want to do a meet, I try to say, hey, let's have at least 3 months together just so I can kind of learn their body, all that kind of stuff. But I'm kind of like, yeah, like as far, there's never going to be necessarily a right time to do a meet. You kind of just got to go do it and see if you like it. You know what I mean? So I think, give yourself like, maybe like 2 or 3 months and then just go do it. For me, it's this thing where it's like, okay, I've already been working out for however long. And it's like, it sounded cool. I just want to go experience it and then go from there. Worst case scenario, you don't like it. You know what I mean? And then you stop. But even if it doesn't go great because you didn't have a whole lot of quote unquote time to prep, if you just enjoyed the experience though, well, now you have that incentive to go about a proper prep or whatever it may be. So yeah.
Typically I found with most people too, if they really do enjoy meets, it kind of lights this motivation, this intrinsic motivation where their training has like way more purpose.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my gosh, like I got this total at this last meet. Okay, sweet. Oh man, I'm going to do XYZ thing because like I know I didn't do this right, or I could optimize here a little bit better, and then like see like what happens. Like, maybe you try a different training approach. You're like, like, oh man, like I felt like this peaking strategy didn't work very well, or like
Yeah.
I came in flat, or I was still kind of holding on some fatigue. Like my deadlift was stronger 3 days later than it was on the meet day.
Yeah.
I guess I want to talk to you a little bit about that then, because I guess peaking is something that a lot of lifters talk about. Mike, I have a couple of questions. So one, to start off, do you think peaking is overrated or underrated? And then B, what strategies do you use to peak your athletes based off of their fatigue responses?
Got you. Ooh, so is it overrated or underrated? I think it depends on who you talk to. You know what I mean? But I guess I would say probably collectively as a whole, I would say it's overrated. In fact, I would probably say the whole concept of a meet prep is overrated because I personally think that if you're one of these coaches where you're still treating like the prep so differently from like what your training is like the rest of the year outside of that, then you're probably missing the mark already to begin with. Like I tell people all the time, when it comes to the only real difference between like the off season and then like the quote unquote prep or in season is that if you're in the off season, it's probably just because you don't have a meet planned or in mind, right? Whereas when you're in season, you know when your meet is. But as far as like the way we go about our training, like volume, you always need enough volume to be building and maintaining adaptations anyway, whether you're 6 months out for a meet or 2 months out for a meet. As powerlifters, we should always be trying to get stronger on the big three anyway, right? If we're cycling rep ranges like triples, doubles, singles, or if you're doing singles year round, the goal should always be to get strong on the big three. You should always be doing accessory work to get additional muscle mass and keep you healthy with movement variability. I think the biggest differences might be like, maybe you're a little bit more cost specific closer to a meet because maybe some people can't be as specific year round for like health reasons. So they have more variation further out from a meet. And as they get closer, they try to get more specific. Sure. You're probably focusing more on higher intensity singles close to the meet. Sure. But outside of that, it shouldn't be this huge drastic difference where like, you're doing a bunch of random high volume variations all year long. And then only 12 weeks out of the year going to the meet, you finally get comp specific or whatever. Right. So the reason why I say that peaking is probably a little bit overrated is because I think there's a lot of people where they kind of train in whatever ridiculous fashion they want. And then they think the peak's going to save them. Right. When really, to me, all peaking is doing is you're kind of just fine tuning what you've been doing year round anyway. You're getting a little bit more specific, right? You've got your workload up to a certain point where you can kind of like keep building and get those adaptations going the way you want. And then you finish that off by kind of tapering things a little bit, try to bring that fatigue down a little bit so that you show up as well as you can on the platform, right? And I really feel like people kind of overcomplicate peaking and tapering as far as you've got two extremes. You've got the people where, they try to have people feel so fresh to where they pull back way too early. Like it can be 4 weeks out from the meet and they're pulling all their volume away. And you just pulled away the very thing that was giving you the adaptations that were making you strong. So even if you feel quote unquote fresh on meet day, you're going to feel weak. You got the other people where I think they go to this opposite extreme where you've been doing a certain amount of workload all this time and you're clearly getting results from it. Their strength on the top high end is clearly going up. And suddenly when you're 4 weeks out, it's like, okay, now we're going to blast people like just so much volume and be like, we're going to super compensate when really all you're doing is blasting with even more volume to where they're either one, not going to recover effectively and probably possibly get hurt or regress, or two, you're just really kind of masking where their fitness is, which just makes it hard to gauge what they can do on meet day. It's kind of this fine balance of like, okay, we're just always kind of steadily doing a little bit more workload with each training cycle, right? Like, let's say within 3 blocks of a training cycle, you're trying to do a little bit more workload than what you did the previous block. And then when you start a whole new training cycle, your start points maybe can be a little bit higher than the start of the last training cycle. You're trying to steadily build things up, right? And as you get closer to the meet, it's just more so about like, okay, getting more of that specific practice in with the singles, keep everything else as consistent as you can, as far as like the variations, the stuff that you're doing. And then like I said, tapering things just enough to where you feel a little bit better than maybe the heavies that you hit during the prep, right? So the two ways that I like to really go about the quote unquote peaking and taper is kind of like, one is the traditional way that I'm sure you're aware of. And it's funny, my meet video, which will hopefully be coming out today or tomorrow, I actually talk about this, like how I peaked myself differently compared to the traditional way. But the traditional way is usually like, you might, you're doing your usual workload. Maybe you hit like your highest exertion of prep at that 2 week out mark, right? So you're hitting like your RP like 9 or like, maybe even like 9.5 singles at the 2 week out mark to kind of see where your strength is at. Then you've got that normal week of training. At the 1 week out mark, you hit just heavy enough to kind of maintain that fitness, right? You're not going to get much out of hitting like an RP 9 or 10 1 week out from the meet. In fact, if you mess that up, you probably screwed yourself for the meet, even if you do taper. So you hit heavier 2 weeks out. Then 1 week out, you're hitting just heavy enough to kind of maintain your fitness. So maybe you're hitting like, RP 6 to 7 on RP, like 5 to 6 on deadlift and like maybe 7 to 8 on bench. Then, you taper, you're the rest of that week going into the meet, so you can show up and hopefully match or beat whatever you did at the 2-week out mark, right? That's kind of the traditional way people kind of peak and taper. Something that I've done with a lot of my clients, where the reason I first started doing this, because different people have different responsiveness to intensity, right? Even though we talk about like volume when it comes to tapering, people don't always necessarily think about how people respond differently to intensity. Some people, they can hit a heavy lift 2 weeks out from the meet, and then 2 weeks later come in on meet day and they're good to go to beat that, right? Some people, if they hit like a high exertion squat or deadlift, it takes them longer to recover from that. Even if you taper their volume, like it takes them longer to be able to come in and replicate that same intensity again. So what I found for clients like that is I do more of like a build where they'll actually hit their heaviest exertion of the prep, a block out. So let's say we have 2 blocks left, right? So like in that first block, what we'll do is like, okay, you'll hit like, maybe like RP5 week 1, RP6 week 2, RP7 week 3. Then on that week 4, we'll push like to an 8.5 to 9, like that highest exertion of prep, right? Then in that final block leading into the meet, you kind of just replicate that same thing where maybe you do like, okay, RP5 week 1, RP6 week 2, RP7 week 3, still taper the way you usually would, taper that volume. And then you're hitting your quote unquote heaviest exertion of the block on actual meet day, where you'll hit like, your RP 8.5 to 9 or whatever it may be. And because you've had more time to recover from that last bout of intensity, you feel a little bit better on meet day. And it's also predictable because you're pretty much just doing what you always do to finish out your blocks anyway. So if you're kind of programming your blocks in this fashion where your clients feel strong on a specific day anyway, which that's something that I think a lot of coaches probably might be even still disagree with me on, because I know a lot of coaches, they kind of just let the blocks go continuously and they kind of try to find in how many weeks does this lift peak or taper. But I personally believe we have way more control over that than what people realize. I believe if you give someone a structured block where it's like, okay, you're pushing these RPs on these specific days to this for this long, and then we scale back, I think you have more control over it. Yeah, within like a 4-week block, maybe some people show up more on week 3, maybe some people show up more on week 4, but you still have way more control over it if you structure it that way versus letting the block kind of just go on endlessly until they kind of burn themselves out, right? So if you do that, you kind of find predictably like within a 4-week block how they show up and when they show up, you can time that into the meet and just replicate the same thing with the taper. And that's kind of what I did for myself with this past meet.
Yeah, that's so first off, my whole perspective is kind of the same with like whole peaking and whatnot. Like, especially the whole super compensation thing, and because you're having a little bit more data come out about that, it's like you're just making yourself more fatigued, and usually you're really not getting a much of a bump anyways. And lots of the time it's just like, oh, I hit like 330 in prep, and then I hit 350. After I super compensated and I tapered, it's like, well, maybe you would have hit 340 in prep and then just hit 350. Like, who knows?
Exactly.
But I think that's a really, really awesome takeaway for the listener in terms of peaking, in terms of, basically you just have to pay attention to your own fatigue response. And that's, maybe one of the big, maybe, if you want to have as good meets as possible, trying out those things, kind of like seeing like, how do you respond to high intensity? What happens to a certain lift on when you go with like really heavy singles or whatnot? Are you the type of person that really just loves intensity on certain lifts? Are you the type of person where volume responds better and whatnot? Because like, I've had some lifters I peaked literally where we did 0 singles. We pushed sets of 5 though, or something like that. But then, it comes in on meet day and then they hit a PR single. And like, I've had so many blocks too like that. And whereas, that happens to me consistently, like bench press, for example. Like I was like looking at my old history. I'm like, well, if I'm doing like anything below like sets of 5, it's lower RPE anyways, more power work, more that technique work. And like, because I do in regards to like bench press in particular, I kind of treat singles as more so technique practice than actually like a strength stimulus. So although it is very specific, it's just not that much volume. You do a lot of singles at like an RP9, like have like a really, really good stimulus, in my opinion, for long-term adaptations to actually happen really well from that. Or maybe you're just doing it for like a very short period of time, like Bulgarian style training on one lift to really push that. But yeah, like it's just interesting when you talk about that, because I think it's something too that like you might just present both these strategies and be like, oh well, like I do this for all lifts. No, you don't necessarily have to. As you gather more information about yourself, for me personally, like my squat and my deadlift just love intensity. My bench press doesn't. It likes higher. It likes more volume, pushing higher rep ranges. Whereas I love pushing heavy singles, doubles, triples on squat and deadlift.
Yeah.
Might bounce back pretty well from that. Provided I don't go above like an RP like 8.5.
Yeah.
Again, but like you're going to learn, some people can push harder. Like usually, like say you have a girl, maybe she can push RP 9.5 and she's going to be just fine. Maybe, but if you have a dude, let's say you have Jamal Browner, you're saying go to like a 9 RPE on deadlift, 2 weeks out, and he's like pulling almost 1,000 pounds. Like you probably can't get away with that. So there's a lot of nuance to it. I want to ask them a little bit about like I know that like for somebody like Ashton, for example, who seems to respond really well to intensity. And he peaked pretty well into this last raw nats. How did you see him?
So what's awesome with Ashton is that, so in our first meet that we did together, the winter record, that was still back in 2020. Yeah, I want to say 2020 winter record. We did the traditional kind of like, have him hit his highest exertion at the 2 week out mark, then 1 week out mark, hit some lower exertion stuff, taper, and then show up on meet day. That went really, really well. Then at the meet we did in Texas in February of this year, we tried the other peaking strategy, the one where we kind of like, hit the highest exertion of block out and then kind of build into the meet, because it's one of those things where Ashton's interesting in the sense of he responds really well to intensity, but it's also like, okay, you're hitting these huge objective loads. So maybe having a little bit more time to like kind of recover from that will let you kind of show up nicely, right? And even though he still showed up and performed well and the squat responded decently and the deadlift responded okay, his bench press didn't respond quite as well. We know with Ashton, like the more he has like that exposure to heavy stimulus on bench press, the better off he is. So we end up going with like the 2 week out version of the peak for nationals, and it worked really, really well. And it worked well for Ashton for a couple of reasons. One is, yes, he does respond really well to intensity. We get a lot of our volume in for him, like on like the secondary days, but then also a lot from just accessories. A lot of his actual concept work is just like heavier stuff. But also psychologically, it's like Ashton's the type of person where he just has to be very dialed in mentally to perform the best of his ability. He calls it like feeling like he's on, you know what I mean? And for him, when it's like, hey, I just hit these numbers like 2 weeks out under all this fatigue, it makes him feel very dialed in to know like, okay, I can smash less than that to hit the total that I need 2 weeks from now. Like, like when it's like, okay, if our goal is, hey, we're trying to hit anywhere between like 800 to an 810 squat on meet day, and you just smashed 820 2 weeks ago under fatigue, you're going to smash 800 to 810, like, 2 weeks later, you know what I mean? So that's something that has to be considered too, is the psychological aspect of how someone might peak. Like if they respond well to both styles, just physically, well, okay, what makes them feel more confident psychologically? Do they feel better knowing that, hey man, I've had 4 weeks to recover from like the last highest exertion I've hit, I'm going to smash at the meet? Or they feel more confident knowing that, I just hit this 2 weeks ago, so now I can go crush this. You know what I mean? And with Ashton, so much of it really is about like, load management and like knowing when to push and when to pull back and the timing of that and stuff like that. And then a lot of submax stuff. Cause like, with Ashton, like, we still got, get volume work and back down work is a big difference with him though. And well, I wouldn't even say a big difference, just something that I started incorporating with a lot of my clients now. It's just how submax his volume work is. I think for a lot of people, submax would be like, okay, back downs are between maybe like 70 to 80% of your 1 rep max, or maybe you're doing like a 10 to 12% drop from like your top set. Whereas I'll do stuff like back be like in the mid 60% range, even on a primary day, and get no higher than the mid 70s of your 1 rep max. And or like on your secondary tertiary day, you might be in the mid 50 to mid 60s. And I'll do big percent drops, like 15% off from a top set, 17% off from a top set, because with the way I program specifically, it's like, okay, if we're getting the heavy kind of specific exposure we need intensity wise through those heavier top sets, right? Then the back downs need to be just heavy enough to kind of give us a baseline of volume and allow us to get skill practice with the movement. Then our accessory works, I'm obviously big on that, craftsmanship, right, is where we're really pushing things closer to failure. And that combination allows us to get the workload and stimulus we need to get the adaptations that we want, but we don't feel anywhere near as beat up. So I guess the way you can look at it is, if most coaches, even coaches who do accessories, kind of have like a 90-10 type range of how much is on the barbell movements themselves and how much is accessory, I'm more of a 70-30. Because my mindset is, if we can get the same adaptation need either way, I much rather get in a way where we're getting what we need from the top set, we're getting the press we need from the back downs, and we can push those accessories harder and not feel as beat up, versus pushing the top set really, really hard, pushing the back down sets really, really hard, feeling so beat up to where you can kind of pull through your accessory work and then just feeling completely wrecked afterwards. And obviously that's a spectrum, right? It's different. Some people respond better to heavier back down work. So it just depends on, like, you know, their strength, skill level, leverages, etc. But that's something else I plan to do a video on eventually, is talking about like just how submax you really can get with submax and still make good progress, kind of regardless of what the skill level of the lifter is.
Yeah, I just did a podcast with the dad driven strength guys, and we talked all about that.
Yeah.
And I made I also had like an article on like kind of how I program, in a video on like how I like do like did like different phases and whatnot, kind of like similar concepts, changing on the phase or but yeah, like it's not like a huge difference. And I think that's actually really a good thing to talk about too, is just like the importance of, you know, just building muscle, having a strong base for powerlifting. Because I know that you said like you're not leveraged very well, but you know, you
Yeah.
built a lot of muscle, and that's why you're probably pretty good. Like I think another really good example that's like Charlie Dixon. You know, dude's just built. And but if you look at him, he's like, I don't think you're built for the sport. Like long legs, long range of motion on deadlift, long range of motion on bench press, but he just has so much muscle mass. How would you go about you know, having somebody build muscle and then like move up weight classes to kind of like find like their ideal weight class? Because I think that's something that you know, obviously, you know, every now and then people have to move down a weight class. I think more or less for most of your powerlifting career, it's just going to be consisting of moving up weight classes and putting on muscle mass. So how do you like to guide that for your lifters?
I like to do it steady, man. It's like, I feel like if you're in general, right, if you're just not even like in a major surplus, but if you're just like, if you're in a steady surplus, right, and you're doing consistent training volume across the big three and your accessories, where you can recover from it, right? I always tell people it's not what you can do, it's what you can recover from. So assuming you're doing enough work where you can recover from it, and you're in a slight surplus, then over time you're gonna gain muscle mass, and that's gonna increase your weight on the scale anyway, right? I'm somebody where in the same way I don't think people need to just try to like starve themselves and do a crazy aggressive water cuts to make a weight class, especially if you're not like a top 10 competitive lifter or whatever. I don't think you need to like just force feed your way up into a weight class either. Like I think some people are like, oh, I'm this tall, so I need to be this weight class, so I'm gonna like force feed myself and gain like 3-5 pounds a week. It's like, no, just don't starve yourself. Like just let yourself kind of eat comfortably and kind of boost your calories as needed based upon your performance and your recovery. And over time, you're going to steadily fill the weight class out anyway. Like me, when I first started powerlifting, I was walking around like in the low 150s. So I was just naturally like a light 74. And I didn't try to purposely bulk out of it. It's just over the time and the years of gradually getting stronger, putting on more muscle mass, I eventually got to like, okay, the low 160s and then the mid 160s. And then, you know, I eventually started sitting like a little bit heavier, like in the upper 160s and 170s, right? And then, you know, I water cut a couple, like I water cut for nationals, I water cut it for a meet in 2020. And for me, it's just this thing where it's like, okay, this isn't feeling good, I'm not performing as well. I need to just let myself kind of keep steadily building up, right? And just eating a little bit more. And even now, as I'm filling out the 83 kg weight class, I'm not out here gaining like, you know, 3-5 pounds a week. I'm, you know, doing it very nice and steadily. So that's kind of the approach I take with the lifters, like kind of based upon like what their appetite is and how much we can get away with eating without just putting on a whole bunch of unnecessary fluff. Because there's a big difference of being at the top of your weight class at say like 12-13% body fat versus being at the top of your weight class at 20% body fat, right? If you eat your up to the top of your weight class at 20% body fat, you're just gonna have to cut down anyway because you want to be at the top of your weight class with as much muscle mass as possible. So I like a nice steady approach with it where like, you know, if I had to put like a number to it, I'd be like, okay, let's maybe gain like anywhere from half a pound to like a pound a month, right? And it also just depends on like the level of the lifter, because obviously you can gain weight a little bit faster and have more of a big muscle mass if you're newer to all this. But if you've been doing it for a while, then I think kind of just letting your weight kind of build up steadily with the workload is the best way to go about it. Not just from the standpoint of your maximize your performance with muscle mass, but also just for health. I don't think you should sacrifice your health for powerlifting personally.
Yeah, no, I agree with all that. And my personal approach, because like I can be 82.5 and I'm currently like 181, 182. You know, it's just like I'm just going to eat to support my training. Yep. And as my training progresses, because training is the stimulus for muscle growth and nutrition is supportive of that training and whatnot, you know, if I'm eating to support that over time, as long as my scale weight's going up and whatnot, my lifts are going up, you know, and gaining at a reasonable rate. Like I had Kedrick Kwan on the podcast, and he says that he recommends between, you know, anywhere between 0.5 to 1.5% body weight per month, which is like 1 to 3 pounds per month. He said he kind of just perma bulk for a while in that range. You maybe take like a cut like every now and then, but like if you're really doing that, like, you know, a slow controlled weight gain, especially as a powerlifter, like you're just gonna have so much better training time. You're not gonna like spend time going like in and out of like, different like calorie states. You'll just constantly support your training, not have crazy leverage shifts, be able to really learn your body and really allow your body to grow into you so that you can actually be prepared and be like the best lifter that you possibly can. Because like, I started off this year in January, I was 174 and I've slowly gained up to like 182. That's what I was this morning. Like that's a pound a month, man. And like
Yeah.
people like, they're like, oh man, like I'm not gaining all this weight. I'm like, but it's like, is your gym performance going up? Like, are you feeling good? Like, are you recovering on time? Are you doing all these things? Like, provider program is good. It's like, okay, it is great. Well, just be patient, man. Like this takes time. And it's just like, I think muscle mass too, just it helps with like preventing injuries. Like the best, like Stephanie Cohen talks about this, and she's just like the best way to prevent injuries being strong.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
No, it world of difference. That's why I'm so big on the accessory work, because it's like not only are you getting more workload in to get additional muscle mass to recover from, but just the movement variability, like getting out of just doing the same 3 movements over and over, especially when we oftentimes do those movements in just a shortened range of motion too, reducing raw to lift more weights, you're just going to feel better. You're going to feel healthier as a whole. Especially if all you do, like it's one thing if you powerlift and maybe you play sports or activities, but if not, then I think accessories become that much more important. So yeah, I think that's huge. And then I think you asked me something about game day handling, or am I?
yeah. So I kind of ask you about like how do you go about like handling like game day for like your lifters, and just like also with that, like how do you recommend people approach meet day with like nutrition, sleep, expectations, like calling attempts, stuff like that.
Got you. The mentality I try to instill in my clients, and this is where the benefit comes in with like, with having things be programmed on like, having a primary day that's kind of like your heaviest day of the week, and then having secondary and tertiary days kind of fuel that. And what I usually like to do, if they're able to, is I like to have my clients' primary days be around the same day on what they compete on. So I like most of my guys' heaviest days to be on like the weekend, like Saturday, Sunday, because that's usually when most meets are, is on a Saturday, Sunday. So if you're hitting like your heavy squat and bench on Saturday and like your heavy deadlift on Sunday, or maybe you're hitting like an heavy SPD on Saturday, or, maybe you squat and deadlift together on Saturday, you do heavy bench on Sunday, however it's set up that way, or if it's Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, Monday, however it's set up. I tell my clients that, hey, a meet day for us is just a normal training day with more people watching you, more height, and no back down volume. That's pretty much it, right? So as they get better at learning how to gauge themselves for RPEs and stuff like that, right? Being like, okay, I'm going to have a range of where I think I can be for my RPE 8 or 9 today, and I'm going to take what's there within that range based upon my last warm up. We pretty much take that same type of approach with the meet day. So, and this is whether I'm their game day handling or not, I always give my clients a plan. I don't just give them like, okay, these are the numbers we're hitting. Like, no, we have ranges. Like, you're going to have like 3 options for your third tip. You're going to have like option 3A for like the highest thing we're going to go for. Even if we're feeling really, really great, this is the highest we're going to go for based upon what we've hit in training to be smart. We have like option 3B, which might be like, maybe like if we're not feeling like God tier, but we're feeling still pretty good to kind of beat the best we hit in training. And then maybe option 3C, which is going to be around maybe the best we hit in training, because assuming the taper goes well, you should be able to at least do that, right? Match the best hit in training. Same thing with the second attempts. We're going to give them like 2 to 3 options based on how their opener moves. So that way, it's kind of like the same way where it's like, okay, based on how my warm up moves, that determines what I take my RP on my top sets. It's the same thing. Okay, based upon how my opener moves, it'll let me know what to take within the range that's been my options for my second attempt. Based on how my second attempt moves, it'll let me know what to take within the range of my 3 attempts, and then give them like certain hard lines. Like, for example, okay, if you go with option 2B instead of 2A for your second attempt, then don't go for any higher than 3B. Even if 2B moves really well, don't go for any higher than 3B. Just play it smart, play it safe, right? Stuff like that. And of course, there's a difference too between like if you're at a national level competition where the goal is to win something versus if your goal is at a local meet just to PR, right? So I think that's the first thing, is having a game plan is huge. It's way less stressful. It's less stressful for you as the coach. It's less stressful for the lifter because they have a plan. They know there's something set. It's not just kind of arbitrary picking numbers the day of or whatever, right? As far as the game day handling itself, you got to know your lifters, right? And this is where that communication and that coach-client relationship is important, because the way in which you talk or, encourage and motivate one lifter can be very different than another. Like, I have some clients where they're just, they're very kind of like when they're being handled, they're kind of just quiet into themselves. They don't really want to do a whole lot of talking. All they want is to know when it's time for them to go up, what numbers to put in, and have brief discussions about what to do for each attempt, right? I've got other clients where they get very nervous and very jittery, and they want you to talk to them more to kind of help them stay focused, right? I've got some clients like where, you know, where you got to like be very soft spoken with them, but hey, you got this. And I've got other clients where I have to like get them angry. You know what I mean? Like they want to get zoned out. Like Ashton, for example, somebody where like, you know, I frankly speaking, I had to talk shit to Ashton for some of his attempts. Like that's what gets him going, right? Where I have other clients where if I talk shit to them, they would feel awful. So it's like, you know, knowing your client is very, very important. And then being able to pay attention to the pacing of things, like know where they're at in the flight, right? Like, okay, are you like one of the first few people to squat? Are you in the middle of the flight? Are you at the bottom? How many people are in the flight before you? How much time do we have to do warm-ups? Already have their warm-ups planned. Like warm-ups shouldn't be arbitrary. You should already know like what they're doing warm-up wise, know about how much time they need to take between warm-ups. Like all these are basic things that I think you should know. And then really it's just do it more. Like the more you do, I would say that probably out of all the things I've gotten better at with coaching over like the past probably like year or two, it's like the game day handling has gotten better just from doing it more. Like the more you do it, the more you're prepared for different things that can happen. Sometimes weeks can start late or something, like, you know, something can happen, or maybe the equipment's not what you thought it was going to be. There's all these different things that you get more prepared for just from going there and having experience, right? Have contingencies for your warm-ups, meaning like, man, there's not as much time to warm what we thought. Okay, well, can we make bigger jumps on certain things? You know, things like that. That helps a lot. As far as things like, you know, the nutrition, you should be discussing that with your client before they even get to the meet, right? Because everyone's a little bit different. The way you're going to have somebody like rehydrate and get ready who just did a wire cut is probably going to be a little bit different than somebody who's able to just eat comfortably into the meet, right? Find out if your client is somebody where they're able to get a lot of solid foods in if it's earlier in the day, or if there's somebody where you need to rely more on liquids, right? Because obviously there's the obvious stuff like, you know, water, Gatorade, Tri-Oral, half sodium, half potassium, half carbs. But like, what does that look like for the lifter? If you're somebody like me, where I don't have much of an appetite in the morning and I don't have to water cut because I'm a light 83, then I need to make sure that I'm eating and fueling properly the night before going into the meet. So that way the day of, all I have to really focus on is like, you know, water, liquids, Tri-Oral, stuff like that. But if you're somebody where you have a huge appetite, right, and you did have to water cut, we need to take advantage of that. It's like, okay, how much are we eating before squats? How much are we eating before bench? Do you feel better if you eat a certain amount before squats compared to bench? Or do you feel better if you kind of have more liquids before squats and then eat more food going into bench press? And you learn more of this the more you like just learn your clients and practice this stuff in training. Like that's why I tell my clients, treat your primary days like your practice meet days, essentially. Even if it's not like a mock meet where you have magnets like that. Okay, let's practice how we feel you the night before. Let's practice what we're eating the day before. Because if you're doing certain things a very specific way in training on your heaviest day, and then on the meet, you throw all that out the window, you're screwed. Like you should be developing these patterns and habits, and your coach should be learning these patterns and habits that you have before you even get to the meet. So that way it's very smooth.
I love all that. I think that's basically literally one-on-one how to have a good meet day, appropriate expectations, and really just plan.
Yeah.
Because like what you said, sometimes we just make this out to be a bigger thing in our head than it actually is. And the reality is you're just going in, you're just doing some max outs and, you know, with your friends. One thing I always encourage my lifters to do is talk to people.
Yeah.
Talk to other powerlifters there. Like, you know, I said, like, you know, I'm a little more introverted, but like when I talk to people, I get so much more relaxed. And I talk to people in my fly, I ask them, like, hey, like, how are you feeling? Or like, hey, like, you know, like I get like a warm up buddy, or I get somebody who's like going to hype me up, or somebody who's like, you know, going to like talk to me, or like whatever. And like, I met friends at my meets. I met clients at my meets because I was nice and like I talked to them in between things. You're like all supportive. And to just understand like everybody there wants you to succeed, and regardless of whether or not like you came into that meet to set like, you know, and you actually, you know, it went great, you know, everything went according to plan, you know, everything, you know, you hit all great PRs and whatnot, like that's awesome. It happens, but there's going to be times when that doesn't happen. Like I had a meet in July, it was outside in 100-degree heat in Utah, and I was cramping, I was miserable, I lost 9 pounds because my body was just not holding any water. And I mean, like I should have just adjusted down a little bit on like my bench press and whatnot. because, I cramped up on my second attempt, and, I was like, oh, man, squats feel great. But, the bench press, I hit 15 pounds less than I did in training. And then on deadlift, I just missed 672 because I was just tired. I was just too tired. I came in 2 days later and hit it. It's like, and also like, don't like, I think it's really important also to remember, like, regardless of what happens, I'm not a bad person. I will still be able
Yeah.
to go train. Nobody hates me. It's not proved like I'm a more like worthwhile or less worthwhile human being. And understand, like, one of my old coaches always said, dude, you're going to do like so many other meets. Like, don't worry about it. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
this is just inexperience. This is just,
Like,
taking off the boxes. And it's just like, did you have fun? Like, did you like at least enjoy the experience? Like, because again, it's like, I think sometimes we put all of like the whole success of a prep on meet day, and that's not how it always works. Like, sometimes meet day just isn't there. Sometimes you just don't have it. But how was it? That was a training cycle. Like, what did you learn from it? What did you learn from yourself? And like, say you just like, you can always like reframe things. I think that's all, like, that's also really important. Like, and then like also like, say like you are weaker than you wanted to be on the day, just make your lists. Like, I will always tell people, like, missing lists haunts you more than going lighter and making a lift.
exactly. And that's where perspective is so important. That's why I tell people to have ranges. Because if you just thought I'm gonna hit this number and then that number's not there, and you go for it anyway, you miss it, like you said, it's gonna feel way crappier than if you did like 10,
Yeah,
15
because
pounds.
in your head, you're like, I kind of knew that wasn't there. I was still went for it. Like I'm an idiot.
Exactly. So that's where having a plan matters. And like you said, the meet day not going the way you want doesn't take away from how well the prep went. And then, like I said, it's about, okay, well, why didn't the meet day go the way I wanted? What can I do to be better next time? Like for me, this meet I just did, my goal was to go in there and hit a 700 kg total, which would have given me like 100 good lift points. And I felt 12 and a half kg short of that because I went 8 for 9 and missed my final third deadlift. And I know why. Big part is because like my third squat was a much bigger grind expected it to be. And now from looking at this meet and my past 2 meets, which something else I'm going to be doing a video on here pretty soon. I now know what's happening in meets compared to in training is allowing me to like grind my third squat attempt so much more than when I'm hitting that around the same number, a little bit less than that in training. And it's like moving much smoother. So it's like, and that doesn't take away from how great the meet was. I still PR'd my total. I went 8 for 9. It was the most fun meet that I've ever done, the best prep I've ever had. And it's like, if I choose to just focus on, but I didn't hit the 700 kg total, I didn't get the 100 good lift points. It's like, yeah, but dude, I increased my total by so much and I got 98 good lift points. You know what I mean? It's all, like you said, it's all about how you frame it. And it doesn't mean that you use it as an excuse for like, oh, I don't care about my goals. It's not a big deal I didn't hit them. No, of course I'm upset that I didn't get quite what I wanted, but it doesn't take away from the fun, positive aspects. And it just motivates me to get that much better. And,
Yeah.
that's something else too, where I said, where being a lifter and experiencing that myself helps me relate to my clients when they go through that. I can look my lifters in the eyes and tell them, hey, it's okay. We didn't do everything we want to do because we're gonna get better and come back stronger. I can tell them that honestly, and they can know I'm not just blowing smoke up their ass because I have done the same thing with myself, and that matters. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's just like, it doesn't mean like maybe you did hit on meet day, bro. You're gonna blow up 640 next meet, right? Like, you
No,
got more data. It's like, and
right.
that's like something else too. It's like you miss a lift, like, but like it's like for example, I was really upset about missing 672 in my meet, because like I was like, that was like what I really want. Like, deadlift is my thing, and it was
Yeah,
kind of funny because like I'm a deadlift specialist, and all my
yeah,
followers were like, I hit a PR total in like 100-degree heat, exhausted, like cramping up, just hot and miserable. But people
yeah,
were like saying, well, you hit 300 kilos in your last meet, but you hit 295, and then you missed 305. And I'm like, yeah, I hit like the day after. Like, who cares? Like, it's just
yeah, yeah.
like powerlifting is fun. Make it fun. Don't make it out to be more than it actually is. And like,
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
That's
just
why I
how,
tell powerlifting, really anything you do, any activity or that you do that you putting all this time in when you don't have to do it should expand upon your life. It should not be the source of your life. And those are two very different things. So yeah. Yeah.
I love that. I think that's a great way to end off the podcast here. So I wanted to
Yeah.
just thank you so much for coming on. This is a great conversation. I really enjoyed talking to you, getting to know you a little bit better. I guess where can people find you if they want to follow along and possibly get coaching, or learn a little bit more about that craftsmanship?
Yeah. So you can follow me on Instagram at the Swolefessor, just one word, the Swolefessor. You can find my YouTube channel, same thing, the Swolefessor. And my email is theswolefessor@gmail.com. And yeah, man, no, I enjoyed it. Thank you so much for having me on. It was great to, talk to you and get to know you as well. And yeah, this is a great time. Like I said before, I love talking about this type of stuff. So it's always a good time for me.
Yeah, I really so much appreciate your time and your insight and knowledge. And we wish you all the best of luck with all of your coaching endeavors and crushing that next meet.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
All right.